Welcome back to another Painfully Honest Tech podcast. Right here, right now, right here, right now on the Painfully Honest Tech Network. We are back again. As promised, this week we are going to talk about our best tech of the year. That will probably include some smartphones. Maybe it will include other things. I don't know. Maybe we'll talk a little bit about what we're excited about. Maybe we'll throw some shade at other creators. Who knows?
Ooh, that's exciting.
Who knows? Maybe we'll talk about the thing that's going on that's actually making me want to buy a Pixel 8 Pro now. Whereas I really had no interest in owning one before. And so, yeah, if you're new here, thank you for coming. Hit that subscribe button. Come back and see us here on the Painfully Honest Tech podcast every single week on a hopefully more consistently regular day. But it's been a crazy month or so. But yeah, we do this every week. We come on, we talk about stuff. We usually go far afield and then round our way back. If you want to check out some other stuff that we've done, there are links for both my channel. Well, this is my channel, but there are links for Adam's channel, Tech Odyssey as well. And there's all kinds of links to like music that I've done and book that I wrote and tech that I use. So you can check those things out down there if you wanna like immerse yourself in Jason.
Yes, you can do that.
As so many people do. So how are you doing this week, Adam?
Living the dream.
The enthusiasm that is emitting from your mouth is infectious.
That's me. I'm one of those infectiously happy kind of guys. It's been a week. Lots of crazy things going on in my world, and then of course we've had. I cover a lot of Pixel stuff, so as you alluded to the Pixel 8 Pro excitement, we had the big quarterly feature drop, and monthly security patch dropped yesterday. At least for some people, anyway. Google's very slow to roll these things out, but there are a couple new
Samsung these days.
Yeah, there are a couple of exciting things there, especially with the new Gemini Nano AI technology. And
yeah. I mean, as with all things AI, what I hear about it sounds cool, but then when I think about it, I'm like, I don't really know what that means. So we'll talk about that a little bit later. It's been, I don't know, man. Maybe it's just the winter has started, the holiday season. It's been difficult to get enthusiastic about things, but
my wallet's certainly been busy buying presents for my 6 kids and my wife. So no lack of excitement there.
You've got nobody to blame but yourself.
I'm not really blaming. I mean, I'm happy. I like to collect things. I like my collection of children, but they are expensive.
I'm sure that they would be pleased to know that you consider them to be a collection.
I was a Pokemon master in the 90s. I was a child collecting master in the 2000s. So it's just not natural progression, I guess.
Yeah, and you'll have plenty of people to take care of you in your old age.
Yeah, I joke about that because everybody's like, you got a lot of kids. I'm like, they're not kids. They're 401ks. Like one of them is bound to pay off.
That's the thing, man. Like we got our grandson now. Maybe he'll grow up to be like a professional athlete or, wildly successful artist or something like that, or business executive. And I won't have to worry about the fact that I'm 52 and I have no retirement savings.
401ks, man. Just invest a lot in that child.
That's it, man. I invest my time, I invest my knowledge, my love. So yeah, because those are
maybe he'll invest dollars one day
that I have plenty of.
Then you get to those twilight years, maybe he'll be playing for the Chicago Bulls or something. Who knows?
I tell you what, man. Ever since he could hold a ball, he's got some kind of arm. So,
hey, maybe he'll be the next Buckeye quarterback. You never know.
Not Ohio State, man. No way. As a region, they're not even. I don't even know if we've ever played Ohio State, West Virginia. That is, but I just don't like. I don't like the blue blood programs of college football and college basketball. Because it just seems like, especially since ESPN owns all college
stories already written, man.
Yeah, Fairmont State or Florida State used to be Used to be one of the Blue Bloods when in the Bobby Bowden era,
They used to be
but
in the
now,
narrative, and I was like, "Wow, that's crazy."
yeah, you go 13-0, like not just 12-0. You don't win out the regular season, but you win the conference
Thir-
championship game.
13-0 conference championship, and then excluded.
Yeah, and what's the rationale there? Oh, they're in the ACC. I mean, I mean, Cincinnati made it to the college football playoff 2 years ago, 3 years ago,
I mean,
and they were in
ACC is not
Conference
bad. I mean,
USA.
it's not Conference USA. I mean, that's like, remember, I think it was what, Colorado? Was it Colorado that went 13-0 like 6 or 7 years ago? And then they're like, "Nah, you're not good enough. Your conference isn't good enough."
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's the whole thing is ridiculous. I think
I
it
think it was
should
Boulder
be
State. I think it was Boulder State that went 13 and
maybe
0.
maybe or Boise. I don't remember. Yeah, but I think that to solve this problem, there should be like an 8-team playoff, right? I mean, you don't want these college kids playing like 16 games, but you know, it seems like just randomly picking four when
Yeah, there's a lot of really good teams. It's kind of arbitrary, and it really is. It really is like excluding legitimate teams who played like. It's not like, this is not like we're playing John Madden. These are kids who played like their heart and soul for months and come out at the end 13-0 and not even in the playoffs. It's like ridiculous.
and didn't Alabama lose a game?
I believe so. Yeah,
They lost to Texas.
yeah.
Yeah, first game of the season, they lost to Texas. And so a one-loss Alabama team
It's better than a
is
13-0 FSU.
because Alabama is big money.
Roll Tide, freaking Rick rolled FSU.
Man, I have a friend whose daughter went to Alabama. They live in Pittsburgh. She went to Alabama specifically because of the like social media that like I guess social media is super hot and people like
Well, I
down
mean,
down at
if you take a look at universities and you take a look at the athletics programs and the on-campus presence, like all sorts of stuff, I mean, I guess there could be something to that. Maybe the exposure from just being able to tag Alabama and being
well
at those events will raise your social media stature. I don't know.
and I guess like so there are a lot of people who've had success as influencers coming like from Alabama to the
Maybe
point
we
where
should go to Alabama.
I don't know,
Like,
man.
I'm here for an undergraduate degree in social media.
I yeah, I think it helps to be like an attractive, um, you know, 18 to 22-year old.
I
I
that
think
that doesn't
I
hurt.
think
I
that's
mean,
part of it. Yeah, I mean,
I
if you
don't
were to
think it's
try
the
to
fact
break
that I
into
got.
that scene, yeah,
Yeah, I
if you
don't
were to
think it's
try
the
and
fact that I went to Texas Tech that I'm not
yeah,
successful in social media influencing.
yeah. So, but yeah, she went specifically. I mean, maybe not 100% specifically, but that was one of the main driving forces in the decision. And I'm just like that's it, to me. That's just weird. Like social media is like the social media presence available to the students because of the influence that going to
The
school there
university
has.
has.
It's just weird, man.
That's
Anyway,
crazy that would play into a college selection. It really is. I'm not an Alabama fan. The only Alabama I ever cared about was the USS Alabama in the movie Crimson Tide with Gene Hackman and Denzel
oh
Washington.
yes, yes, that's a good one.
One of my
That's a good
favorite
one.
movies.
Yeah. Well, the thing about Alabama that I get salty about is okay. So Florida State used to make me salty for the same reason because Florida State had Bobby Bowden as their coach.
Good
Guess
coach.
who? Guess what team Bobby Bowden coached before Florida State?
Was it Virginia?
West Virginia.
Ah,
And we burned him in effigy on his front lawn and on the quad, and and chased him out of town. He went to Florida State and won like 4 championships. And Nick Saban is from Clarksburg, West Virginia, which is 30 minutes away from where I grew up. And
I'm not a Saban fan.
Nick Saban, just all he does is goes down there to Alabama and LSU and all these places that he goes and he wins all these games. And I'm like, hey man, bring some of that home.
Yeah, right.
Well, Jimbo Fisher, also from Clarksburg, West Virginia.
Well,
He's available right now, but Texas A&M is paying him what, like $80 million to not coach their football team. So I don't know if he would be the
we're in
right
the
choice.
we're in the wrong line of work, but bringing it home,
Yes.
good phrase there.
Yeah.
Talking about, we wanted to talk today about some of our favorite tech
Yes.
2023.
Yes. I'll start.
Okay.
I This is gonna sound ridiculous, but iPhone 15 Pro Max um, is my favorite smartphone of the year, and it's not just because it's an iPhone. I mean, that does play a role, but I do believe, and this is my sort of end of year, long term, you know, TLDR of the iPhone 15 Pro Max, best iPhone they've ever made. And I'm not saying that facetiously. I say, like,
So
the
I said the
cameras.
same thing. And I've formerly, like, the iPhone 8 Plus was my all-time favorite iPhone, and
Right.
the iPhone 15 Pro Max has supplanted that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just solid all the way around. And the cameras, I feel like the past couple of years the cameras have made improvements. They've gotten new features, they've gotten, better lenses, et cetera, et cetera. I feel like the camera like really turned the corner and came together, like good selfies, good range of being able to, like, they got the telephoto and all the way down. All of those seem to hold together, so you go from one lens to the next lens to the next lens, and it's not it's good all the way across. And then video quality, to be able, we said this last week, but I mean, just to reiterate, to be able to film in like professional grade codecs, and film in logs so you can color grade the way that professionals do.
And you can record directly to physical storage media now. So
Yeah.
if you want to plug in a 5 terabyte SSD with USB-C, you can record directly to it. So you don't have to worry about the limitations on your internal storage space anymore.
And I've seen like a camera rig that has a space to hold like one of those Samsung little SSDs, the
Yeah, a little
aluminum
T5 drive.
T7. Yeah, they have a space to hold a drive. They have, space for a microphone. They have all this, so it's this whole camera rig that you just drop your iPhone into and then plug all this stuff in, and suddenly you're on your way. So I just feel like the iPhone has always been good, and from time to time there have been things to complain about. I honestly don't know of anything to complain about with the iPhone 15, except maybe the colors. I mean, the colors weren't exciting, but and the iPhone 15 colors.
The colors are, but the thing is when it comes to the Pro Series phones, the colors are always drab because I guess because it's a Pro Series phone, they want the
Right.
colors to be less flashy and more like you're not in an office environment pulling out your iPhone 15 Pro Max and it's like neon pink. I mean, not that
Right.
that is unprofessional, but typically, having less flashy colors is something that's more associated with professionalism, at least
Yeah.
historically.
Yeah.
So
I
I
still
get
think,
that.
yeah, my favorite of the Pro colors is still the 13 Pro and Pro Max
Of the green.
green. Yeah, the green.
That
I
green
just like
color
that
is
a lot.
gorgeous, and not just because I'm wearing a green shirt today, but the green was good. My favorite is the iPhone 14 Pro Max Deep Purple.
Yeah,
I mean, I have an affinity for the color purple, but the green
good
is
book.
probably a second place for me. The iPhone 15 Pro Max is funny. I do agree. I think it's the best iPhone they've ever made. I don't think it's the phone of the year, but it's like number 2. I mean, it's so close when you take a look at what Samsung's done with the S23 Ultra and then what Apple did with the iPhone 15 Pro Max. They're both just so good this year.
Yep.
Last year, I had a lot of complaints about the 14 Pro series. I had a lot of issues. A lot of that was namely to do with iOS 16, but iOS
People have
17.
battery issues.
Oh yeah, horrible battery issues.
Yeah.
But the iOS 17 feels better, more stable, good battery life on the 15 Pro Max. I mean, I know we had the overheating gate at the beginning, and then of course you can crush the back of your phone if you really try hard now, but it's
Yeah.
more repairable at a cheaper price. So there are some trade-offs, but by and large, if anybody wants to get an iPhone 15 Pro Max, I think that they're going to be happy for years and years to come.
Yeah. I think you're right. And even even though I was never like, oh, the iPhone doesn't have USB-C, it needs to have USB-C. I was never one of those people. I didn't necessarily care about the Lightning jack, and it was easy to plug in, easier than USB-C. It worked fine, but I rarely plug my phone in to do data stuff. USB-C offers faster speed. USB-C offers you faster speeds now, but
Well, I get that at a certain level, not for charging, but for like universal usage for like connecting a storage media drive. I think
right.
USB-C is more important than Lightning. Not having to have adapters and all that other stuff. And I didn't really care. I have a Lightning cable. It's plugged into my aftermarket power brick. It doesn't matter to me, but I do appreciate the benefits of being able to plug all my phones into the same cable now.
Yeah. Yeah, the convenience of that is great, except for the fact that my wife still has a 14 Pro Max, so still in the car
Ah,
we have to have we have to have two. But and my Apple peripherals are USB-C or Lightning, so it's. But yeah, I've been using this phone now since launch day, so we're coming into like 2.5 months, and I've it just works, and I haven't felt any kind of like, oh geez, why is it doing this kind of thing. And I've been on iOS 17 since the first beta came out. I just live dangerously, and
so the only I still have sporadic airdrop failures, which I'm like apparently a minority. It happens to be quite frequently, but I airdrop a lot more than most people, I think. The only real thing that's frustrating to me, other than that, with iOS 17 is they made some fundamental changes to like the cursor movement for text selection, and also their
Mhm.
autocorrect stuff changed.
Yeah,
And I find it very difficult to try and get my cursor where I want it to go sometimes. It keeps bouncing around. I'll
yeah.
try and put it somewhere, and then it's like, oh no, it wants to be at the beginning of the sentence. I'm like, no, don't do that to me.
So that's I found that sometimes the autocorrect gets weird, and it'll suggest like a word that I've never used as like the replacement for like what or there. And it does like
Yeah.
little weird things like that. But for the most part, it's been pretty good. And what ends up happening to me when I switch back and forth between an iPhone and an Android phones, it's much easier to like sort of tap into a text field and get your
Oh,
cursor
way
where
better.
you want it to go. But with the iPhone, I find that it's much easier to do the press and hold of the space button and then just sort of like move it to where you want it to be.
Well, I do that, but that's what I'm talking about. I'll slide it to where I want it to go, and then it just magically decides it shouldn't go there, and it puts it at the end of the sentence or the beginning of the sentence, and then I'll try and move it back, and then it won't. It refuses sometimes to let me put it where I want it to go when I'm like doing that.
Yeah.
I don't understand why it's doing that.
Yeah, and with the airdrop thing, I know Jerry Schultz, who's another YouTube tech content creator, mostly Apple stuff. He mentioned on Twitter the other day that he was having airdrop problems, and
Hmm.
I use airdrop whenever I use my phone as a B camera or something like that, and I need to get something on to edit it, and it's not like gone to iCloud yet. I'll use airdrop, but I don't use it on a regular basis, so I can't say that like my experience is typical as a just light user of AirDrop. Although I will
I
say that when I did plug my phone in to transfer something, just when I was doing my initial review to test it out, very fast, very fast.
I I don't think that my experience is typical. Like I don't go around. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is the worst phone ever because my AirDrop fails
Right.
sporadically. But when I do post about it, there'll be two or three people who are like, yes, mine fails all the time. And then there'll be like five or six people who are like, you're crazy. You're holding it wrong. There's nothing wrong with
Yeah.
my airdrop worked fine 8 minutes ago. So there are always some people that agree with that. So I think that some people have an issue with it, but I've been having issues with it for several years. So I think it's just,
And
I don't know.
the hard thing about it is I think that Apple's operating systems are and the features that they offer are generally like more reliable, or at least they've been around and they've been reliable, and so when they don't do what you want them to, like you can never find like this is the commonality of like all of these people that shows you like why.
Hmm.
It always just seems just like it happens randomly to people, which is strange. But
But
let's
that's
move on.
technology.
Yeah, yeah. There's always gremlins. So let's go to you, and your. Well, I guess that's my phone of the year. So let's hear your phone of the year.
So it's difficult for me. I have three phones that I really like this year, and the 15 Pro Max is very good. Um, so I'm a big Sony fan, and I've
Mhm.
since switched over. I record all my videos with the Sony Xperia One Mark V. I think that there were some huge improvements there when it came to like capabilities and reliability. But I don't think it's the best phone. Like for me, it's the best phone. But as
Right.
far as like mass populace, I would not recommend it, especially at the price point.
Hmm.
I think the S23 Ultra I think as far as flagship phones go, is probably the best. And everyone's like, well, the iPhone has this and iPhone has that. I'm like, well, when you take a look at the Samsung S23 Ultra, it's got the S Pen, which is very, very good and adds a whole nother level of versatility. You've got DeX, and then you've got the 100 times zoom. You've got 8K video. I mean, there's a lot of stuff which borderline gimmicky for some people. um, but I think what it brings to the table and the polishing and the refinement that we got with Android 13 this year and the Snapdragon 8 Generation 2 just created, it's just such a good phone.
Yeah, I'll agree with you on that. I mean, I'm each year I'm more and more inclined to say it doesn't make any sense to compare an Android phone to an iPhone
It's really hard.
because Android is a very mature operating system, and each manufacturer does their own special thing with it. You know, they all have their bells and whistles that they put in, and the iPhone is the iPhone, and it's a very mature platform as well, and it has a totally different way of working. And so I just think you like I can't hold up an iPhone and well, I've got my Pixel 7a. I can't say like this is a better phone than this, right? Because to me they're different enough at this point that the individual experiences are unique.
I think
And
for me, it's very easy to say that the iPhone 15 Pro Max, best iPhone that you can get. And it's very easy for me to say that I think the S23 Ultra is the best Android phone you can get. I think nobody, especially the United States, really has a different viewpoint than that. I mean, there are some that'll say, well, the Pixel 8 Pro is better. I mean, there'll be some fringe ones, but I think by and large, I think most complete, best experience, S23 Ultra. But here's another great thing that we get with Android is we do have Google that has their take on it. We have Sony,
yeah,
we have Motorola, we have all these different phone brands at OnePlus, and they all different foldables, the flippables, the different takes on. You've got stock Android, you've got One UI. There's a lot of flavors,
right.
and my probably best phone, best most that I would likely recommend to somebody would surprisingly is the Motorola Think phone. It has
Okay.
been such a good phone. And yes, it does have the Snapdragon 8 Plus Generation 1, but I don't have a lot of heartburn about using last year's chips when they're good and the price point reflects it. Uh, I
Right.
have frustrations when the iPhone uses the same chip as last year and still charges me $800. When you can get a Think phone that's been on sale, I mean, I think it's still on sale for $399, but it was $350 for a
Yeah.
couple of weeks. And good cameras, beautiful screen, high refresh rate. Um, it's got the desktop client software stuff on there, added levels of security, great build quality, good performance, great battery. I mean, just so much that it's basically a flagship phone, like an end of 2022, early 2023 flagship phone, but you could get it for 350. I mean, normally
Right.
it's like $600, but I mean, there have been so many phones that drop prices at the end of the year, and like just to be able, it's funny. I'd been putting up like my affiliate links and made a bunch of videos and stuff. And I was like, here, buy this instead of the Pixel 8. And a lot of people were surprised. but I'm like, it's half the price. And in a lot of ways, it performs better. So
Yeah.
it's really a no-brainer for me to recommend, but I just really have been surprised by that phone, and I like it a lot.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that ends up happening to Android phones over the course of the year, and hasn't really happened to, like, say, Samsung. I noticed this year as much, but because there are so many different Android phones and Android manufacturers, and especially in certain price points, it gets super competitive.
Mhm.
So the prices do vary, and whereas like the iPhone is the only game in town. Like you can buy several different versions of the iPhone, um, and get them at different price points, but Apple owns the market, so
Yeah,
they
and
set
they
the
charge a lot of
prices.
money.
Yeah,
I mean, we're
and
still paying $429 for the iPhone SE 2022.
yeah, no, I agree. I mean, but I guess like the only thing that I would say there is because the chips are so over engineered when they come out, that would it be nice to have a refresh of the SE in 2023 or early 2024? Yeah, it probably would, because then you get, what would they put in there, the
A15?
16, 15, and so
Like, doesn't it already have the A15?
we're on the A17 now with the 15 Pro Max.
Yeah, I believe it's got
Yeah.
the A15 in it.
Okay. I think that 2 generations back, for a
Yeah.
phone that costs half of what a regular iPhone 15 would cost, or an
Well,
iPhone 15 Pro even. Um, I think that that's reasonable, only because Apple's chips and the experience that you have across the board with those chips remains constant for such a long time.
oh yeah, it's so
And
good and whenever it came out, and I was like, they put the A15 in the iPhone SE. I was like, wow, that's kind of mind-boggling because it has one camera, like a 720p
yeah,
screen. Like, there's so many different things that will never ever tap that power. But I think that we're done with the SE. Unless they make it larger, or they're going to turn, maybe like they'll do something. I think the SE name will live on. I think maybe they could migrate Touch ID to the power button like they have with the iPad Airs,
yeah,
to keep that feature in there. But yeah, I would like to see a 2024 refresh in like a meaningful way, because the SE 2023 is much 2022, as much as I loved it and I think it's a good phone, at $400 is just, so it's a joke at this point.
yeah, and kind of the problem that the SE was meant to solve when it first was brought to the table was there were two. So this was, I think it came out the same year as the iPhone 16 or iPhone 6, or was it the
So
iPhone 7?
the SE came out in 20. So the SE, there was a 2020, there was a 2022. I think the original one came out in 2017.
Yeah, 2017. And that was the one that still had the body style of the iPhone 5. And so, for people who wanted that phone but an updated version of it, um, that was the attraction of that phone. But it also sort of filled this spot where you only had two iPhones. You had the iPhone number and the
And the
iPhone
Plus.
Plus, and there was nothing in between that kind of allowed for somebody who didn't want to make the leap or wasn't able to make the leap to the more expensive phone to get an iPhone. And that made total sense to me. But over the last, since 2017, the last 6 years, we've gone through, now we've got the iPhone Pro models, we've got the iPhone 15 models,
Hmm.
and then they still sell at least one of the versions of the previous iPhone model. So like the iPhone 14 and 14 Plus. I think maybe just the 14 is available now. And
Well,
so
I
there you have
also,
five models that are one's going to bottom out around $600 or $700.
mhm.
So
The other thing too is, we I think we'll see I think we'll see the mini come back this year, and they may even call it the SE, or something to that effect. The thing is with those phones, they're so powerful and so non-spec driven that you don't need one every year. So
yeah,
the SE, reason we got an SE 2022 refresh is because of 5G. The SE 2020 only had LTE. So I understood why they updated that at the time that they did. I mean, they made money hand over fist because they reused so much of the same stuff. So it was very easy to just retool it and throw the new chip in there with the new modem.
Right.
But the mini, a lot of people were sad to see it go. I'm like, we don't need a mini every year. A mini, I think, every 2 or 3 years, just like the SE, and I think the same thing with the Plus. I thought maybe they would alternate the Plus and the mini every other year, and I thought that that would be a good strategy.
Yeah, the mini was interesting because if you watch among the techarati, the folks who talk about this stuff all the time, there are a lot of tech influencers that love the mini, but boots on the ground people would say no one's buying the mini.
Yeah,
And
it was really weird
even though
because
Apple
go ahead.
never releases actual numbers, but it seems like the mini was nowhere close in sales to any of the other models. So they dropped it, but now people are like, "Oh, I want it." So I don't know.
I don't know. I mean, I think it's important because it is nice to have powerful, high quality phones with a smaller form factor. And some companies still hang on to it, like the Zenfone with Asus, or even you look at the iPhone. Well, you look at the Pixel 7a. Even the Pixel 8 is a little on the smaller side this time with a 6.2-inch screen. So not everybody wants a gigantic like 7-inch phone. I know that that's where we've gotten, but I think that there's still room for a flagship level high performing phones at like the 5.8, 6-inch kind of size range.
Sure. Yeah, I think you're right. I think you're right, and I think a lot of people appreciate that form factor. How it's best done? How do you best deploy that? I don't know. It's an
Well, the lines are
interesting.
kind of blurred too because they're like, we've got the iPhone SE, we've got the iPhone Mini. Like, I think that they really needed to trim down and streamline their product. Like, it's a little confusing, and everyone's like, well, if you like the SE, you just get the Mini. I'm like, that's kind of like that's $699. The other one's
Yeah,
$429. It's almost like 40% more dollars. It's not
yeah,
not appealing to the same audience.
yeah. It's true, and so I guess with Apple, they have to ask themselves, do they still want a sub $500 phone, right? That will attract. That's a different buyer than the person who would buy like an iPhone 15 or a 15 Pro. The difference there is, I don't remember, is the sticker price of a regular base model iPhone 15 is like $800, right?
Yeah, 799,
So
829 if you buy it unlocked.
yeah, so I mean, 429 and 829 is there's $400
That's a
difference
big
there.
disparity.
So that's a lot of people. I mean, you do still have the opportunity to get the one model that they keep from the previous year, but that's you don't get that selection. So I don't know. I mean,
I think
I
it's
think
in their
overall,
interest.
go ahead.
Like I think it's in their interest to have the SE lineup. And we have to
Yeah,
remember also that the iPhone itself is not the end game. It's just the introductory crack rock.
yeah,
Like
yeah.
you get
The first one's free or
yeah,
cheap.
you get the
Go ahead.
first one free. Yeah, you get your iPhone crack rock. And then they're going to make money off of you for the next 5 years off of services, Apple TV Plus, iTunes, extra cloud storage, like everything, the whole
Yeah.
9 yards. And that's one thing that Apple has really been able to blow the pants off of Android with is just the longevity of continuing to milk money out of their customers once they sell the phone.
Well, the interesting thing is, and I don't know if Apple started out with this intention, but the Apple ecosystem evolved in such a way that now all of the different everything works together, right? And for the most part, it's gotten more and more seamless over the years. I don't know that they started out saying, "Hey, let's build this, vertical infrastructure so that we can have all of our stuff all work together so everybody has to buy all of it." But
Well, they want
it's
it
worked
too.
out that way, you know? It's definitely
It is
worked out
funny.
that way. It's at some point they I think with like the iPad, they probably saw the potential for like, oh, they've got the phone, then they get the tablet, then they get the laptop, then they get the desktop.
They talk
Oh,
together.
okay. you know, and that's just expanded out now to Apple TV and AirPods and all of this other stuff. So before you know it, like I think if you stuck with the SE or like cheapest versions of everything, because do they still make an SE watch, or did they discontinue
So
that?
they do. The thing with the SE watch is they only make it every couple of years, just like the
Right.
regular SE. But yeah, that's in the same vein of what I was saying. You get the software and services, but you also have the ecosystem because it doesn't matter whether you have an iPhone SE or you have an
Yep.
iPhone 15 Pro Max. It's still going to integrate just as well with your Apple Watch Ultra,
Mm-hmm.
with your iPad, with your MacBook, with your Apple TV. Like
Yep.
there's you got the product immersion, and then once you get these things, of course, it makes it even harder to get away. But the other beauty is they're always giving you freebies. Oh, here's your complimentary free year of Apple TV Plus.
Yep.
Here's your 4 free months of Apple Fitness Plus. Here's your
Apple
6 free months
Music.
of Apple Music. So like it's just more of these little introductory crack rocks just
Yep.
along the way that they sprinkle to their products, and then they get you locked in, and then you're like paying more money a month for services than the phone.
So I put up a tweet earlier this week and didn't know if I was going to get any interaction with it, but basically I looked at kind of the lineup of Apple TV Plus, right?
I
And
saw that tweet. Yeah.
yeah, so as I looked at the lineup of Apple TV Plus, and then I thought about it as compared to all of the other streaming services and their original content, I watch more of Apple TV Plus's original content than I do of any other individual streaming service.
I will
And
say Apple TV Plus, they have really good original content.
yeah, they do. And I think, I think if you were betting on this horse race a couple of years ago, you would have looked at Disney Plus and you would have said, well, they got that catalog, man. They got that catalog. They got the Avengers. They got Disney. They got Star Wars. They got everything.
Hmm.
And then they came out with the original content. Unfortunately, a couple of years later, we realized like, especially well, the Marvel original content, like I
Putting down the toilet.
I guess their thought process was, they have a formula and all they have to do is repeat the formula. And so the people involved are not as important.
Yeah,
So they
but
had
they kind
showrunners
of
who were,
are.
yeah, I mean, they found out that, you can't just recreate that formula and the magic happens every single time. Like the last few Marvel TV shows, I've watched like the first two episodes or something and been like, I don't even care. Like this new season of Loki,
I haven't even watched it yet.
well, my wife and I, like, we loved the first season of Loki. And I think the
Oh,
first
that's good.
season, I thought the first season of Loki was really smart. And I thought it was taking the whole thing in a really interesting direction with multiverse, blah, blah, blah. And it was, it set itself up so like season two was going to be really interesting. But then, like, the 2 years in between, Jonathan Majors has some major issues and
That's
all of
created a big problem for them.
and so I start watching Loki season two, and at first, like, I couldn't even recognize if the woman who plays the female version of Loki was the same person. And then they started out, and I felt like, okay, I just watched the recap. I should know. I watched the show. I watched the recap. I should be ready to go. I had no idea what the hell was going on at all. I watched two episodes, and I still had no idea. And I'm just kind of like, if
It's
this is
weird
what
though because so many people have been praising it, and I have a hard time. Like I usually wait until time has passed after these shows have come along before I watch them. There's so much hype when they come out, and it's all over social media. I'm like, oh, the new episode of Loki's so amazing, but then I hear folks like you talking about it, and they're like, I don't know what I just watched.
yeah. And, you know, to be fair, season one of Loki was kind of, it was definitely not like a totally linear. I mean, obviously, it's a multiverse kind of thing. It wasn't a linear story. It bounced back and forth between different things and all that, but I could follow it,
They
and I
held to
thought
the
it was
concept
interesting.
really well. Like they
Yeah,
they they brought you along for the ride.
I think what ends up happening a lot of times, and it takes a while for it to sort of catch up, is that there's a conventional wisdom out there. So after Avengers Endgame, Marvel was at its height. and they're bringing out their TV shows, and it seems like they just can't fail, right?
Hmm.
Too big to fail.
We
And
got the
so
BlackBerry playbook.
yeah, and so and so the shows start coming out, and some of them were really good. Like I enjoyed Captain America: Winter Soldier. I enjoyed WandaVision. I enjoyed Loki. I enjoyed, some of like most of those earlier shows. However, I think that what ends up happening, and this is especially true for people who are influencers in this space, uh, they want to attract their viewership, and so maybe they aren't as quick to
Be
cotton
judgmental.
to the fact that the shows just aren't really all that good. And then eventually, like, there are some people who at first seem like they're crazy people just trying to get views and, say a negative thing to get views. But then suddenly, like, a couple of series come out and you're like, yeah, Secret Invasion, like, no.
I think another thing that helped out with the success of some of the earlier shows is they tied in still with the original plot line and characters,
Yeah.
and it just gave you some insight into what was going on or some of those characters that's not in the movies.
Yeah.
And now we just have these new shows like She-Hulk and Moon Knight and like all these other ones that just aren't doing so well that people just aren't invested in.
Well,
I think.
they announced that they're bringing out a second season of Moon Knight. Now, Moon Knight was another one of those. I remember I read the Moon Knight comics when I was a kid, but it's a different vibe of comic. It had all that like Egyptian runes, and so it was like more of a supernatural thing than a superhero thing, right?
Mhm.
And but that was a totally different kind of thing than like your mainstream superheroes. And Marvel's always kind of had those characters that are off in the periphery. And Moon Knight was one of those to me. So it was kind of surprising to me that Moon Knight gets a series.
Well, yeah, he's not one of those ones. I really wish that Marvel would get the Silver Surfer IP back from Sony.
Yeah, I think that also has hindered them, because if you think about it, a lot of people say, "Oh, Iron Man wasn't really a very popular character until they made the movies." I don't know if that would be the way I would phrase it. Iron Man was a solid IP.
For a long
Iron
time.
Man had been around for since the 60s, and he had had many different story arcs, and he was in the Avengers, and he had his own comic, and so he was a very popular character
He was a
alongside
staple.
Captain America and all that kind of stuff. He just wasn't like the marquee characters that Marvel had. And
Mhm.
who were the two marquee characters from Marvel at the time that all these movies started to be made?
Spider-Man and X-Men.
Spider-Man and X-Men. And so, to Marvel's credit, when they started this whole Marvel universe, they they had to build a universe without their two most popular intellectual properties. And eventually they got Spider-Man, and now they have X-Men, right? But I think that they, at first, it seemed like a natural growth, and then it seemed like they were just piling on. And they didn't I like the connected stories, but they stopped making the characters individually interesting.
Mhm.
And I think you just like you have to, even if it's a superhero, like the character has to be compelling.
Well,
Or
it seems like the last couple of years, all of the movies have been to serve a purpose to push along a storyline.
yeah,
As opposed to like in the beginning, it was Iron Man, Captain America, Thor, and like it was about them.
and then
And
it
then you brought them all
coalesced. Yeah,
together. Yeah. So now it just feels like, okay, we've got the next like generation five. What do they call it? Anyway, phases now. Like phase
they're phase
five, phase
five.
six.
Phase four was like, please forget this happened. The Eternals, again, another kind of more supernatural focused, Greek mythology, that kind of thing. They wanted the Eternals to be another pillar of the Marvel universe, and none of those characters are interesting.
Well, and so many of them they try and combine them together. Like even now, the Marvels are like, oh, we'll just throw three different characters in there. Like the standalone ones are the ones that do the best, and the ones that people care about, like Doctor Strange, Thor, Iron Man. Like if they came back and they rebooted Wolverine and made like a standalone Wolverine movie, people would probably love it.
Wolverine is going to be hard though.
Oh, it is. Yeah,
Because,
after
I
Hugh
mean,
Jackman for so
Hugh
long,
Jackman made 17 movies as Wolverine.
and it's a shame because so many of them were terrible. Like all those X-Men movies, I'm just like, they're not that good.
I enjoyed them at the time. I'll say that. And then when they brought the first class version of,
I actually liked First Class though.
see, I liked that movie.
That one I did. I think it's probably the only one. I really liked Michael Fassbender as Magneto. I really liked James McAvoy as Xavier, and I liked a lot of the cast. Like I like what they did there.
And I loved that period of X-Men. And if you told me that they were going to go first class, which is basically sort of like the origin story of the team, and then they're going to go through Days of Future Past, and they were going to go through Apocalypse, and then they were going to go through Dark Phoenix, I would have said that is a brilliant strategy. Those are the best X-Men stories. Let's go. But unfortunately,
The execution didn't work out so well.
yeah, I mean, Days of Future Past is my all-time favorite arc of probably any, well, definitely X-Men, maybe not any comic ever, but I remember reading that when I was a kid and just being so into it, like that near future kind of thing, and all the X-Men have been killed. Like, I loved that. And if they had been able to like sort of thread the vibe that the comics gave through that, and not made, each of them felt like an individual film, even though it was the same characters.
Mhm.
And there wasn't any of that connective tissue.
There's no continuity.
The history of the characters and like the relationships that they have as individuals, as well as they're growing up and they're going to school, they're learning to use their powers. They left a lot of that stuff out, and that's what made people fall in love with those characters. You've got the Scott Summers, Jean Grey, Logan love triangle that never
Tryst.
triangles,
Yeah.
and there's so much interesting about those characters. Each individual character has their own sort of arc, and that's why that team was so beloved. I mean, the idea. See, this is what all Marvel characters are flawed, right?
Yes.
And well, maybe not all, but the most successful Marvel characters are flawed in how they got their powers or how they operate or something like that. Whereas like all DC characters, at least the top line DC characters, only one of them has a dark past. Everybody else is like squeaky clean.
Oh yeah.
Like they had to make up kryptonite years later because Superman was too super. Like, I mean, he could do anything, and there was nothing to challenge him.
Well, and that's kind of problematic if you want to have a future, because there's just you have to have some way you can lose, right? You can't, and that's why it was such a big deal. I remember when I was a kid, the Death of Superman series was like, oh my gosh, he died.
Yeah, that's when I was in high school, going into college around that time, and the Death of Superman arc of comics was. I mean, most people didn't read it because they would buy them in those Mylar bags and then like not open them.
Oh yeah, it was a big deal.
But that was the thing. DC has had these moments where they'll put their undefeatable, squeaky clean characters into these situations where their mortality is challenged or something like that, and that's where they get at their best. But what's the best about, say, the X-Men is that if you're a teen and you're struggling to get through high school and you
can relate.
You see yourself in those X-Men characters, and even when the original characters got older, they're always bringing in younger characters. You got your Kitty Prydes, you got Jubilee. It's like each decade they had their new characters coming in. So that's what made the X-Men such a hit, is that people could relate to those characters. And so when those characters died, like Giant Size X-Men #1, when they rebooted the entire series and brought in all these new characters, like one of the new characters dies within that issue. And that was a big deal at the time, because like you introduce a new character and
then gone
before the thing's over, you kill him. That's crazy, So Marvel has to be really, really careful with what they do with X-Men. And that we've already seen them try and tell some of the top line stories and fail. Well, that was Sony, but do you go back to those stories, or do you like reach for the House of M stuff where when the Scarlet Witch basically like loses it and wipes all mutants off the
I
planet? Like,
I
where do you go
I
for
wanted
the
I
for the
want him to do
stories?
X Factor. I loved X Factor when I was a kid.
Yeah, yeah.
I would like to see them bring in X Factor. But we've been talking about comics for a really long time, which
Hey, this
on
is
our best of tech, which actually is
my
a great,
first
great, great conversation. It's funny
my
because
first love was comic books, right?
we
So
we always go off on these tangents, and I could sit here and talk about it for another hour.
yeah,
But
no, exactly. I mean, I think well, the one thing I wanted to continue to talk about in terms of smartphones is you mentioned as we were going live that MKBHD is doing his camera shootout at the end of year camera
yeah,
shootout, right?
yep,
And every year, if you're not familiar, MKBHD takes all of the major smartphones that have come out in that year, and he does a shootout where you compare the cameras, and he puts the different photos up on Twitter, and you can vote for the one that you like the best out of that group, and then he'll sort of put them all together and score the thing. It's a
it's
huge endeavor. He does like it's a
it's
good thing
different
he
this
has
year.
staff, but so it's different this year though. I
So
haven't seen his tweet yet.
he has a website, and on his website, in three different categories, and it's for best overall photo, best night shot, and best portrait. And you have to go through each, like you're going through basically doing a quiz, and it puts two pictures next to each other from that category, and you don't know which is what phone. And you have to click through about 100 of these samples, and then based off of, and you can keep going. Like you can feed it more input, and it'll keep doing more and more because it's just randomly stacking the cameras, the
Right.
photos from those categories, and then it tells you the top three of what you picked based off of the blind comparisons. And then it's
Okay.
like, okay, this is what you got. So I'm sure that he'll share what his is, what he thinks is the best. But this is, I think, a more interactive way. But I think it highlights something that's important because best is always so subjective.
Right.
And like I could look at an iPhone image and think it looks better than an S23, or somebody could look at a Motorola Razr and think it. So it's funny because I did it. I took the test,
Okay.
and I did all three categories at like 5 o'clock this morning while I was sitting there playing on my phone because I couldn't sleep. And I will tell you what mine are. I guess I did it on another phone, but anyway, so I don't have the results with me. They're on my other phone in the house. But I will say that my number one phone that it picked for out of my picks, best overall smartphone was Motorola Razr Plus.
Motorola Razr Plus. Okay.
So out of all, so I was really like taking like the Pixel or the iPhone was not any of my number ones in any three category.
See, that's interesting.
I did
Um,
get the S23 Ultra for the best night vision shot, but for best portrait shot, I think I got Pixel 7 Pro or Pixel 7 something.
right.
So it was really interesting to see the results that came out of it. And I think other people are having the same kind of experience. And I think it really does highlight a lot of this that people talk about where is it the best? Because
Yeah.
beauty is always in the eye of the beholder, and we all look at things differently. So I would be curious to see you go ahead and do it when you get time later and see what it comes out your results. But yeah, I
Yeah.
was really surprised. Best overall photo for me out of all the ones that all the matches and I picked was the Motorola Razr Plus.
And I will do it and report back next week as to like what ended up winning for me. What ends up, but what I think is always worth mentioning whenever you do these like blind tests or versus videos or anything like that is that there's so many variables in play, right? Like it's quite possible that like that particular photo taken by the Motorola Razr X was composed and exposed and all of those things in just such a way that it was a pleasing photo to look at. And it might not really speak to the overall quality of the camera. Like maybe you don't get that good a shot every time, but they happen to get one there. And I know everybody, like, they try really hard to take these variables out, but you can't. You know, it's
You're
just
never
one of
gonna
those
have
things.
it. You're never gonna have a 100% identical situation that you're shooting every single phone in.
Yeah, and every single phone isn't gonna create an image with all of the same qualities as the previous one every time,
No, because they
right?
have. But then you also look at every phone. You have a different image signal processor. You have a different lens. You have a different sensor. You have there's all the way that the computational photography AI that's built into their software, you
Yeah,
know, produces and enhances the image. And then just because so you could take a photo right there,
yeah,
but let's say that's ideal lighting, perfect situation, good color
yeah.
contrast. You could throw
The
that
the
same
clouds,
camera, yeah, you could throw that same camera an hour later in the same spot. The lighting's just slightly different. There could be clouds. There could be more or less light exposure.
yeah,
The color of the object you're taking, and it could turn out a crap picture. Like it could just
yeah.
not handle it as well.
And I think that's important to like say, and when you're doing these sort of which one's the best competitions, you say within the realm of this comparison, you know, under these conditions in this moment, these are the ones that were most pleasing. And that does give you some information, right? It does tell you that overall the potential quality of the Motorola Razr X
It's very good.
is very good. And you wouldn't think that off, like, just offhand, right?
Well, a lot of
So
these situations could be laughable. If you were to say, if you were to go into it and you told somebody right up front, okay, here's 5 pictures that were taken with the S23 Ultra, the iPhone 15 Pro Max, the Vivo X100, the Oppo
yeah,
Find N, and then
yeah,
the Razor Plus, and
yeah.
they're like, and the Razor Plus One. People, it's a shock factor. They'd be like, no way.
Now what might be interesting would be, okay, so we took 50 shots of different material, different subjects, different this, that, or the other thing with all of these cameras. And we've picked 25 of each. So you go through and tell me which is the most consistently good, right? That's another piece of information that would be really interesting to find, because one picture from one camera compared to another,
It doesn't tell a story.
yeah. But I think if you take 50 photos and you have, 40 that you would share and 10 that you don't, or you have 20 that you would share and 30 that you don't,
Mhm.
that tells another story. And maybe to me, that might be the more valuable story for a consumer, right? Because they're pointing and shooting and hoping for the best result, or
Each time.
expecting the best result.
Well, you can
So
have that. Like you can have a
yeah,
camera that you can, in ideal lighting, take a
yeah,
photo and it looks fantastic. And then it's like 6 o'clock and the sun's going down and it looks like trash.
yeah. You've missed the magic hour, and you've just entered the twilight zone, where
Yes.
there's no light, your eyes can't adjust, and it's just really weird.
Well,
Um,
then there's another philosophy too, because when you talk about nighttime photography, some people are in love with these nighttime photos where it makes the nighttime look like daytime.
yeah,
And I'm like, I'm not taking a photo here because it's not realistic. Like it's dark. Why would I take a photo? So I can appreciate ones that will enhance it enough to where it still looks like it's supposed to, but it doesn't look like it's daytime at nighttime.
yeah. Nighttime photography is supposed to be dark.
Mm.
Whatever light source is available is supposed to be, you're supposed to be able to pick it out individually and recognize it for what it is. But you're not. It's not like, have now overexposed this photo to the point that I can see everything, but it's nighttime.
Yeah, I
It's
don't
like,
like that.
it doesn't evoke any kind of, like, if you see area, like, sky shots, nighttime sky shots with the stars, and a really good lens is really picking out details, and it's very evocative. But I feel like a lot of times smartphone cameras, like, the original intent and the intent for most people who use them is to capture moments, point and shoot, right? And it's very few people who will take advantage of the night sight camera intentionally. Now,
Hmm.
a lot of these cameras will sort of use the night mode when when the moment is correct. But yeah, it's really interesting, and I think it also bears saying, because there might be people out there who are like, well, I can only afford this phone, and obviously this phone doesn't take photos as well as all these other fancy phones, so I can't take good photos. That's not the case. I mean, at the end of the day, the the carpenter, it matters more than the tools. If
Hmm.
you train yourself and you use your tools and you could become really good with them, then you can take really good photos. Or you can, like, guitar players always say this, like, Stevie Ray Vaughan could pick up like a child's guitar that cost $50 and you would still know that it was Stevie Ray Vaughan. I mean, he's dead. But but were he alive and
When he
could
were
do that,
playing,
I mean, it would sound like Stevie Ray Vaughan because he had mastered his instrument, and part of his instrument was his fingers, the way that he held the guitar, the way that he played the guitar, all that kind of stuff. And it's the same with any kind of creative endeavor, and taking photos is a creative endeavor. So I never hear I never hear that in the context of these like shootout videos. You know, I never hear people say like, "Well, this is all interesting, and maybe it's for bragging rights or whatever, but if you have any of these phones with any of these cameras, you can take really really good photos with it as
I
long
think
as
that's a
you
point. I talk about a lot of that in my videos now where I'm like, look, if you have good lighting, it's going to take fantastic photos. Like pretty much
yeah
any phone that costs more than $300 nowadays, if you have good lighting, will take impressive photos.
yeah
And that's just
yeah
not the case. Like 5 years ago, yeah, you probably had to spend $800 to $1,000 to get that top of the line image quality. But now we've gotten this stuff down to a science.
yeah
Hardware has reached such a level of competency in so many areas that even budget phones can take good photos nowadays.
and with the advent of AI computational stuff that happens inside the phone after the picture is taken, that that's a factor that wasn't part of the equation prior
Nope.
to like the pixels, right? So it's a very recent kind of adjustment that we've made, so that even if you don't have the best hardware, the software in there is going to
Make up for it.
give you a chance at something a little bit better. Now, the last thing that we want to talk about,
Yeah, 'cause I know you got to get
and
going here in a minute. So
yes, but I just a little taste for the people, and maybe we'll dive deeper into this next week because I need to do a little bit more research into into what actually is going on. But now we've got the Pixel 8 Pro is, and it's not clear. I think other Pixel phones as well, but the Pixel 8 Pro is the one that they're talking about, is getting this Gemini generative AI thing.
so Gemini Nano, just a quick 30-second history. Gemini is Google's answer to ChatGPT,
Right.
and they have different levels of it. They have Gemini Pro, I believe, and then they have Gemini Nano. Gemini
Right.
Nano is the phone version,
Mm.
and it is only rolling out to the Pixel 8 Pro right now. It's nothing that you're going to be able to. It's not something you can see. It's not an app you can download. It's just part of the software that's downloading, and it's only working for two things right now. One is for the recorder app, and it's able to summarize the conversations for you,
Right.
and the other is for smart replies with Gboard. So it's
Right.
working with smart replies on Gboard. It's going to roll out for WhatsApp and other like communication methods later on. But right now, only Gboard for smart replies, and then only the summarization for recorder. So it's very limited in scope right now. But it's something that's just going to continue to grow and be incorporated into more services and apps as we go.
Right. I heard this morning, I was on Viper's Creator Coffee Talk, and somebody said that they watched a guy doing a live stream where he was like able to draw like a crude rudimentary picture of a guitar, and then the thing would say, "Oh, it's a guitar," and then it would like render a guitar, and sort of generate images from what he was putting in. Now, I didn't see that. I don't know what it is.
That's not something that Google could do yet on the Pixel.
Okay.
But Bard is coming, and Bard is built off of Gemini, and Bard is supposed to be deployed early 2024. So probably right around the time the S23 launches, because the S24, because the S24 is supposed to launch with this new Gauss engine AI stuff they're calling it the smart AI or the AI phone or something. I don't know.
Right.
There's a lot of stuff that's really, I think Samsung is trying to prime itself
Right.
for success in the AI department. But Bard, once we finally get Bard incorporated, it should, I think, then what we should be seeing the grassroots level of generative AI on the phone.
Yeah.
But right now, there's not really generative AI on the phone. You could probably use a third-party app,
Yeah.
but as far as natively, there's nothing on the Pixel that's doing that right now, to my knowledge.
Yeah, like I say, I want to do more research into like where it is now, where it's going to be like in its launch phase, et cetera, et cetera. Because this sounded like okay, it sounded like Mid Journey, you know,
hmm
kind of thing.
No,
Or
it's definitely not there yet.
um,
But that's the
and
goal.
so
Like that's a goal for the Samsung phone. I'm sure we'll see that. I think we'll see that with the S24 when it launches. I think we'll have some sort of generative AI capabilities in there. Like maybe it's probably not quite on the same level as Mid Journey. It's probably like as the kids would say now, mid. It would be like Mid Journey.
right,
But
yeah.
that's where we're trying to head to.
Well, the one thing that I saw that was interesting, and you know, I got to get this in, is that I see that now it's going to allow the Google Pixel camera to act as a webcam, and
Yes. So if you have
this,
a, go ahead.
but the iPhone can already do that. Oh, I get to say it. I get to say it.
Well,
It,
iPhone did it first.
iPhone did it first, and it doesn't have to be plugged in.
That
So
is a but
again,
that is a nice capability though. Like so
yeah,
with the latest Android update, with the latest Pixel update with the December feature drop, if you have a Pixel 6 or newer and your computer supports the video over USB-C, then you can use it as a webcam with your computer.
yeah, which is very cool. And you know, I think I haven't really tried the iPhone version of it. I mean, I played around with it just to sort of turn it on and look and be like, oh, that's kind of cool. But I haven't used it in like any you know critical implementation yet. But so to record my videos, I use Ecamm Live, and Ecamm Live actually recognizes my iPhone, and I can tell it to like wake up my iPhone and start the camera from
That's
the
pretty
app.
neat.
Yeah, and it's totally wireless. So I think that maybe is 2024 going to be the year where AI in the form of how it's implemented on smartphones starts to become something that's a little bit more mainstream? Because I think to this point AI has been a conversation, but the majority of people out there haven't used ChatGPT, haven't used Midjourney, haven't used.
So it depends on two things, and this is why I've been very very sluggish in my excitement level for AI on the phones,
Yeah,
because there's practical AI that's being used right now, and then there's
yeah,
generative AI.
yeah,
So generative AI creates a product. Like you
yeah,
give it inputs, it creates a product. With the practical AI right now, we have the product exists, and then the AI does something to it.
yeah,
So, like, we take a photo, and then the computational photography sharpens it up and makes it look better.
right,
You get a phone call, and somebody starts talking, and the AI can recognize that it's a bot, and it screens it for you. So
right,
it's like it's reactive AI is, I
yeah,
think, a good way to talk about it. So the AI stuff that's in the Pixels right now, like speech to text, voice messages to text, adding a light element into the photo post photography to create an artificial light source or um, call screening, or magic eraser. So all these things are AI products that you can
yeah,
use, but everybody thinks of AI now as Chat GPT. Oh, it's going to write a novel for me. It's going to create this picture. We're not, the power required is just not there on smartphones yet. It still requires third-party servers offsite.
And I think for some reason, like having AI that is assistive or something like that,
Contextual, I think I think what they call
yeah,
is contextual AI. Yeah.
contextual. Having AI that's contextual, I think most people don't recognize that it's there, and it doesn't meet the definition of AI as they know it. And I mean,
Mhm.
God knows, I saw this video the other day where somebody collected from news stories and everything when people would talk about AI, and every single every single time somebody would mention Terminator, right? Like that's most people's idea of AI, and generative AI, like Midjourney or ChatGPT or any of these other things, when you tell it to do something and then it does it without like human interaction other than the prompt, like that's where people start to get weird because they're like, wait a minute, now how am I going to know if this is a
maybe
machine or if this is
maybe
and
maybe next week would be a good opportunity to talk, like have an AI discussion, because
yeah,
there's a lot in AI. I could say I've really been in the weeds with a lot of AI stuff for the last like year.
yeah,
So I got a pretty good understanding of it, and I think it would be a good discussion to have, because I like to think that our audience is on the higher level of the IQ spectrum and likes
yeah.
these
I
high
mean,
level
I'd like to think
discussions.
that.
Yeah, I mean,
I'd like,
my kids
but
watch
no,
it from time to time. They breathe out of their mouth a lot, but I think most people that watch my channel and your channel really like the cerebral discussion and
yeah,
like talk about these things instead of like, ooh, AI, fancy.
yeah. And for me on the other end, I've like used generative AI stuff practically. I've used it for, creating shorts for my channel. I've used it for, doing the first edit of a video, like an A-roll clip, so that it all of the false starts and pauses and everything else gets all chopped
There's
up.
a lot of ways that you can use generative AI or use AI tools in a very practical and time saving manner that could even do
Yeah,
some things better than we could do it if we tried to do it. So I'm pro AI,
yeah,
but I'm also pro understanding what it is, what it can do, and what it's not doing right now.
yeah. And so I think that, and I am too, but I think I'm kind of on the other end of the spectrum from Ryu, where is I don't know a lot of the details and sort of like the up to date knowledge of like where it's been, where it's going, and sort of deep in the weeds on it. But I have used some of the practical implementations of that stuff, and over the course of the year, seen those things get better and faster. And
Oh, this year's going to be an
so,
even bigger jump. Now that we're
yeah,
having these processors that have these specialized cores that can handle much more processing when it comes to these AI tasks, it's going
yeah.
to take it to another level
Ah, yes. But that will be next week.
next
That's a good
week.
idea.
You got to come back.
Yeah. Got to come back, watch next week's show, listen to next week's show, so that you can find out what Adam knows about AI and how I've used it, and and I'll try to dig in a little bit deeper and sort of get my own thoughts about where I see it going too. But other than that, I got to go to an appointment, so this must be the end. I'm sorry, people, but thank you for coming. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Adam, thank you for the co-hosting.
Of
And
course.
if you're interested, all the information that you need to find us in different places is down in the description below or in the show notes or something like that. And of course, we have different links towards affiliate stuff if you're interested in those things. I make t-shirts, I have music. I'm like, I'm a renaissance man. I make my own t-shirts.
And taller than Danny DeVito.
Yes, see, look, made this myself. I,
Not
I
with
mean, I didn't
AI.
actually like make it. I contracted with an on-demand printing place to design. That's what I'm saying. Anyway, thanks so much for being here, folks. Once again, Painfully Honest Tech Podcast, the podcast so honest it hurts. And we'll be back next week. But until then, we're out. Click.